Let's talk about something interesting in today's connected world. We live in an era where sharing is almost automatic. People post about everything from daily routines to major milestones, often adding filters and polish. Yet there are individuals who remain almost entirely silent online. They browse, they observe, but they rarely, if ever, share anything themselves. You probably know someone like this. Maybe you recognize this in yourself. And it raises a question many people wonder about. What's the reason? Why would someone choose to stay out of the spotlight when it seems everyone else is vying for attention? The easy assumption is that non-posters are just shy or keep to themselves. But that's only part of the story. There's a deeper psychology at work here. It reveals a lot about how people see themselves and represents a quiet pushback against a culture fixated on being seen. For many, choosing silence isn't about having nothing to say. It's about control. It's the power to decide what the world does not get to know. Social media, whether we acknowledge it or not, has changed how we view ourselves. It celebrates visibility. It rewards making noise. Those who stay in the background, however, often see things with remarkable clarity. They watch without feeling the need to interject. They think before they respond. They consider before forming an opinion. Research in psychology points to something intriguing. People who post infrequently often show higher levels of self-control, deep thought, and emotional self-reliance. They tend to be less affected by comparing themselves to others and less reliant on outside approval. In simpler terms, they aren't focused on proving who they are. They are focused on understanding it. In a world saturated with performances, that's uncommon. Let's be real. Much of what we share online isn't just communication, it's crafting an identity. It's an unspoken audition for acceptance. Every picture, every update, every caption whispers, "This is me." When someone stops posting, a shift occurs. They begin to separate their sense of worth from digital approval. They stop thinking in terms of captions. They start experiencing moments for their own sake again, not for a camera lens. This is a key insight into the mindset of many who don't post. They seek something genuine in a space that often feels rehearsed. They don't necessarily dislike social platforms. They just can't locate their true selves within them anymore. This isn't about rejecting technology or being unsocial. It's about refusing to shrink your life down to a series of highlights. Once you see how easily perception can be shaped, you start to value what can't be uploaded: silence, depth, imperfection, truth. For some, the choice to stop posting comes after a kind of emotional exhaustion. Perhaps they shared everything once, until it no longer felt authentic. They realized that every time they posted something beautiful, they felt a hidden pressure to top it. They weren't living life anymore, they were staging it. So they stepped away quietly. No big announcement, just a gradual fade from the feed. But here's a common misunderstanding. Not posting doesn't mean not feeling. It doesn't indicate a lack of care. Often, it means they care deeply about presence, about meaning, about safeguarding what feels sacred. There's a psychological idea called psychological ownership. It's the feeling that something belongs deeply to you, a memory, a thought, an experience. When you post it, that sense of personal ownership diminishes slightly. The moment becomes communal property, open to interpretation, judgment, or even ridicule. So people who don't post are often protecting their sense of ownership over their own lives. They keep their moments private, untouched, and purely their own. This isn't necessarily sadness or withdrawal. It can be a form of quiet freedom. Think about it. When was the last time you did something meaningful and didn't feel the impulse to share it? When was the last time you laughed, cried, or achieved something without immediately considering an online post? That reflex, that need to display, isn't natural. It's learned. It's the result of years of likes, shares, and feedback loops training our brains to link validation with value. When someone steps outside of that system, it can feel like an act of rebellion, but it's also healing. They begin to rediscover the simplicity of doing things just for themselves, cooking a meal without photographing it, traveling without tagging a location, feeling an emotion without having to explain it. In that space, something reawakens, a type of self-awareness that doesn't require an audience. However, not everyone who stays silent online does so from a place of calm. Some are motivated by fear of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood. Social media has intensified a subtle anxiety known as self-presentational pressure. It's the constant, low-level awareness that you're being observed even when you're not active. For many, this is draining. They worry that what they say might be misread or, worse, ignored. So they pull back not because they don't want to connect, but because the price of visibility feels too high. They desire to be seen, but only truly, not just superficially. Ironically, sometimes the quietest people online have the most vibrant inner worlds. They aren't absent, they are full of thoughts. They simply choose stillness over spectacle. There's a philosophical layer to this silence. In a world constantly shouting, "Look at me," choosing invisibility becomes a statement of self-definition. They may scroll through others' lives, nodding, smiling, sometimes feeling a pang, but they rarely project their own because they grasp something many don't. Not every experience is meant for an audience. Some of life's most profound events, growth, grief, personal transformation, happen quietly, unseen, unposted. After you've lived through enough of these private transformations, you start to realize that being unseen is not the same as being unimportant. It's actually where identity is built, not performed. Here lies the paradox. Social media was created to connect us, yet it often leaves people feeling more isolated than ever. When you stop posting, you stop chasing digital closeness and begin to rebuild real connections. You start to notice who checks in on you without needing a status update. You learn who remembers you without a reminder. That kind of connection, raw, unbroadcasted, feels weightier, warmer, and far more genuine. People who don't post often inhabit that space. They build relationships that don't require proof. They find comfort in the unshared moment, and they let life unfold without turning it into content. This is also tied to something called identity security. It's knowing who you are even when no one is watching. When you are comfortable in your own company, you don't need an audience to confirm your value. That's not arrogance. It's peace. Interestingly, the same people who don't post often have the most compelling stories to tell. But they save them for when you're face-to-face, not screen-to-screen. Because real connection to them isn't measured in likes or comments. It's in shared silence, in meeting eyes, in laughter that doesn't need witnesses. These individuals carry entire worlds within them. They process deeply, observe constantly, and understand quietly. They don't need the world to applaud their existence. They just need to live it. And perhaps in a world so desperate to be seen, their silence isn't a shortcoming. It's a reflection, a reminder that not everything meaningful has to be shared, that sometimes the most human thing you can do is keep something entirely for yourself. What's fascinating is that the longer someone stays away from active social media use, the more their perception of the world can change. Colors seem richer, time feels slower, conversations become fuller. It's as if stepping back from the noise makes reality more vivid again. Because when you stop performing, you start truly experiencing. There's a quiet beauty in moving through life without needing proof of every step. You're not thinking about camera angles, lighting, or clever captions. You're just there, fully alive, inside the moment rather than outside of it. That's something social media rarely allows us to do anymore. The psychology here goes deeper than personal preference. It's rooted in how our brains process validation. Every time we post something online and receive attention, likes, comments, hearts, our brain releases dopamine, a chemical tied to reward and even addiction. Over time, we begin to crave that validation. We start viewing experiences through the lens of whether they are shareable rather than whether they are real. Now, imagine someone who resists that cycle. someone who consciously chooses to disconnect from the dopamine loop. That's not mere disinterest. That's discipline. It requires significant self-awareness to resist something engineered to keep you engaged. People who don't post often possess a strong internal locus of control. This is a psychological term meaning their sense of worth and happiness comes from within, not from external approval. They don't need the digital echo of "you're enough" to believe it. What's even more interesting is that studies indicate people who take extended breaks from posting or consuming social media content often report measurable increases in emotional stability and life satisfaction. When your sense of self is no longer constantly being reflected back at you through a screen, it becomes more solid. It becomes real. You're no longer editing your life into something easily consumable. You're living it in all its messy, beautiful, unfiltered complexity. Maybe that's the real rebellion, staying whole in a world that often rewards only fragments. But online silence doesn't always equal inner serenity. Sometimes it conceals exhaustion. For many, social media became a place where they sought connection but ended up feeling depleted. There's a subtle emotional fatigue that comes from constantly viewing everyone's highlight reels while you're still piecing together your own behind-the-scenes reality. You start comparing yourself even when you don't intend to. You start questioning your worth even when you know better. Eventually, some people decide to step away not out of resentment but out of self-preservation. They realize they don't owe the world a performance. They don't owe an explanation for their silence. And they don't need to keep proving they're happy just to be believed. This is one of the quiet truths of our time. We've mistaken visibility for value. We assume that to matter, we must be noticed. But real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Some of the most meaningful moments of your life, the ones that truly shape you, will happen without a single person watching. No cameras, no captions, no audience, just you, and maybe that's what those who don't post understand best. They know that privacy is not loneliness, it's intimacy with yourself. Because when you stop broadcasting every thought, you start hearing your own inner voice again. You reconnect with parts of yourself that got lost in the noise. Your quiet desires, your unspoken fears, your internal compass. In today's world, that reconnection is something profoundly spiritual. It's not a withdrawal from life. It's a homecoming to yourself. Naturally, this path isn't always smooth. There can be moments of doubt, wondering if silence makes you invisible, if you're falling behind while everyone else performs their progress. But with time, you might notice something beautiful. Your worth doesn't vanish when nobody is looking. It remains steady like the quiet hum in a room after a storm has passed. Perhaps that's what real confidence looks like. Not the loud declaration of self online, but the calm assurance of self offline. But the truth is, the things that shape you the most rarely make it to the social media feed. Your personal growth, your heartbreaks, your private victories, your quiet acts of kindness, they live in memory, not in media. And maybe that is enough. When psychologists discuss authentic self-expression, they talk about congruence, the alignment between who you are inside and who you show to the world. In the age of filters, that alignment is constantly under pressure. You can begin to live as a version of yourself curated for approval. So, when someone chooses not to post, it might be their way of maintaining congruence, of preserving the delicate truth between their inner and outer worlds. They don't need everyone to see what they're feeling to validate that it's real. They don't need to photograph every sunset to remember how it felt. They live their life fully, and they do it quietly. Here's the interesting paradox. Those who live quietly often experience life with great intensity. They aren't distracted by the performance of living. They absorb details others might miss. The way light shifts on a wall, the pause before someone speaks, the sound of distant laughter. They are present, and presence is the rarest currency in a world built on grabbing attention. Sometimes, however, that very presence leads to misunderstanding. People might label them as detached, mysterious, or even cold. Yet if you look closer, their silence isn't emptiness. It's depth. It's the calm that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself to be understood. There's a quiet confidence in not needing to be known by everyone, just deeply understood by a few. This is what people who don't post often understand best. They know that not every truth is meant for the crowd, that some parts of you deserve to remain untouched by algorithms and outside opinions. Because once something becomes public property, it stops being purely yours. It belongs to interpretation, to judgment, to trends. And maybe some moments are too sacred for that. So the next time you notice someone who never posts, don't assume they are hiding. Maybe they are simply living. Maybe they've found peace in the quiet corners of existence, the ones not illuminated by the blue glow of a screen. Maybe they are the ones who have remembered what the rest of us might have forgotten. That being unseen doesn't mean being alone. That being quiet doesn't mean being empty. And that sometimes the truest expression of who you are is found in silence. Because in the end, we are not meant to be perpetual performances. We are meant to be people. And the people who don't post, in their quiet, unfiltered, beautifully invisible way, remind us of that simple truth every single day. If this perspective resonated with you, consider showing some support. A like, a share, or subscribing for more content like this helps this channel grow and continue the conversation upward. A like, a share, or subscribing for more content like this helps this channel grow and continue the conversation.